Nibblings. I'm sorry it took me so long to get these last 2 chapters of the Fine Jar out to you. I was very sick for several months and I couldn't get my editing done. I'll explain exactly how sick when I finish getting these 2 chapters out. And before I get you to the bloopers I got for you, but I hope you enjoy the last 2 chapters of The Fine Jar by Bright Shadows. Hello, and welcome to the 3rd and final part of The Fine Jar by Bright Shadow, read to you by Buggy Cass. Chapter 9, Old Wounds and Ancient History. The tension between Bakugo and Midoriya finally comes to a head, and more than a few secrets are let loose in the aftermath. 2 weeks pass peacefully. Well, peacefully for his class, anyway. Which means that they somehow manage to avoid getting hurt bad enough to require hospitalization. Or bad enough to need hospitalization if not for Recovery Girl. Meanwhile, the tension between Bakugo and Midoriya grows like a storm peeking out over the horizon. But neither boy will talk about what's causing it, and violence hasn't broken out, so there's nothing Aizawa can do but batten down the hatches and wait. And then, well, he remembers the class hovering around Koda like a pack of wolves closing rank around their wounded member. Remembers thinking, it's not like they're going to be punching other students in the face or anything. They've mostly eased back on that, which apparently is just the universe lulling him into a false sense of security. Because after 2 weeks of as close to peace as 1A gets, Midoriya punches Monoma in the face. He really needs to stop tempting the universe. It's always up to give him a headache or 20 specific headaches. When Vlad knocks on the door frame of the teacher's lounge and calls, "Aizawa," it's all he can do not to groan out loud. He contents himself with a deep sigh and sits up. Who's bleeding? Midoriya's knuckles and Monoma's nose. Aizawa takes a moment to process that as he extracts himself from his sleeping bag. Midoriya punched Monoma in the face. Yup. Why did Midoriya punch Monoma in the face? Don't know. I was too far back to hear anything, but knowing Monoma, he said something he shouldn't have and kept pushing until, well, Vlad shrugs. That beefy kid of yours, the square one, pulled Midoriya back before he could hit him again, and that didn't stop your kid from glaring at Monoma until Kendo dragged him out of sight. Monoma hasn't stopped ranting about your class long enough to get out what happened, and when I tried to ask Midoriya, he burst into tears. Aizawa does groan this time, scrubbing his hands over his face. Not fake get-out-of-trouble tears, either. Real ones. He was still crying when I left him with your class president. Aizawa groans harder. Alright, damage control time, he thinks. He grabs the tissue box off Mike's desk. A second thought has him leaning back to grab a water bottle as well. Alright, I'm going. Vlad claps his shoulder as Aizawa passes him. Good luck. Aizawa just grunts. Midoriya is indeed still crying when Aizawa reaches the classroom. He's unsurprised to see Uraraka holding Midoriya's hand while Ida's arm wraps around Midoriya's shoulders. He's not bawling, but the jerky little hiccuping breaths mixed with the slowly dripping tears of someone trying not to cry and failing miserably is almost worse. This is going to royally suck, Aizawa thinks. At least someone has already dug into the class stock of tissues. The trio look up as the door of the classroom closes behind him. The 3 of them straighten immediately, though Uraraka keeps hold of Midoriya's hand and Ida shifts to keep one hand on Midoriya's shoulder. Sensei, it wasn't his fault! Uraraka bursts out straight out the gate. Aizawa sighs. Uraraka. Dropping into far too deep a bow, Ida follows her with a, Sensei, I understand that Midoriya's actions were not acceptable. However, please consider the extenuating circumstances when considering his punishment. Sensei, Mono
one who should be punished. He never should have said that about what happened to Koda. I understand that Midoriya's reaction was extreme, but I can't say I wouldn't have done the same thing if he hadn't. Midoriya says nothing. Ida and Uraraka continue to trip over themselves to defend him, but the boy himself barely looks up, eyes hovering somewhere near Aizawa's chin before dropping back to his shoes. Go rejoin the rest of the class. I've got him, Aizawa says. Uraraka looks mullish. Ida opens his mouth, puffing up as he prepares to argue. Aizawa raises an eyebrow, staring him down. Ida deflates and nods. I'll see you back at the dorms, Midoriya, Ida says, gently squeezing Midoriya's shoulder before stepping back. Uraraka looks like she might argue for a moment, eyes flickering between her friends and her teacher, but slumps and nods. I'll see you soon, Deku, she says, giving Midoriya's hand a squeeze before letting go. Midoriya gives her a wobbling little smile. Once they're gone, Aizawa takes a moment to observe his most troublesome student. Sorry, Midoriya mumbles, eyes on the floor. I didn't mean to. I'm not trying to guilt you or anything. He gestures loosely to encompass his still dripping eyes and the hiccuping breaths from his efforts to hold back the tears. I'm trying to stop, but I can't. Midoriya bites his lip, cutting himself off. Aizawa very carefully doesn't groan. It's fine. Vlad said you were crying, so I came prepared. Midoriya makes a pained face, but accepts the tissue box Aizawa passes him. I'm sorry I made trouble for him, Midoriya mumbles as he uses the tissues to wipe at his face. Are you sorry you punched Monoma in the face? Ah, there it is, the mulish expression Aizawa hates to see on Midoriya's face. That stubbornness that, while useful on the field, is the bane of his existence in the classroom. At least it means Midoriya stops crying. Well, mostly stops crying. Midoriya, he sighs. Sorry, Sensei. I'm not going to lie and say it's fine. I'm sure anything Monoma had to say about Koda was out of line, but there's a right and a wrong way to go about things, and punching another student in the face isn't something I can condone, even if I understand why you did it. Sorry, Sensei. It leaves a sour taste in his mouth, the way Midoriya doesn't even try to argue. He expected some kind of righteous justification. Aizawa knows that when he was Midoriya's age, he probably would have decked Monoma in Midoriya's position. And while he wasn't quite in the habit of arguing with his teachers, he thinks he probably would have done something. Muttered, sulked, rolled his eyes probably. Something. Not stand there quietly and obediently, waiting for punishment. Can you tell me why you had such an extreme reaction to what he said? Midoriya goes still. I just overreacted. I'm sorry, Sensei. Did he say something extreme? Something I should be aware of? Midoriya flinches. No, Sensei. I overreacted. I'm sorry. We're going in circles, he thinks, exasperated. And then a fucking miracle happens. Midoriya hesitates, fiddling with the tissue clutched in his hands. And then he says, we had a bullying problem at my middle school. And Monoma, Midoriya swallows, tearing a hole in the tissue. It just brought up it made me think of things. And then Midoriya trails off, biting his lip, and says nothing more. Overreacted, Aizawa finishes, as if Ode to Joy isn't blaring through his brain because Midoriya just volunteered information about a problem. Not a lot, yeah, but the fact that he did at all is a miracle. Yeah. It's another piece in a puzzle whose picture Aizawa can't see. And as he scrambles to find where it slots in, he leaves it too long. Midoriya starts to ramble again. I'm not trying to make excuses, or get out a punishment or anything. I wanted to tell you, that. Aizawa holds back the instinctive sigh and drops a hand onto Midoriya's shoulder. Progress is progress, he tells himself. Midoriya opened up, even if it was just a little crack. Even if all but slammed the door shut again. I'll talk to Vlad about Monoma, And while I can't say you didn't have a good reason to be angry, I still can't let you punch another student and walk away unpunished. Yes, Sensei. Class duty for the rest of the week. Midoriya gives a little jolt and looks up, surprise and something else crossing across his face. Too fast for Aizawa to catch it. He knows what the surprise is for, at least. Extra classroom duties are light enough punishment as it is. Even lighter considering Midoriya makes a habit of staying behind after class to help out with them when he isn't assigned them. Yes, sir, he says, clear confusion in his voice. Aizawa nods again and lifts his hand from Midoriya's shoulder. The beat continues. He gets more details of what Monoma said from the other students present. Then he brings it to Vlad, who grimaces and promises to sort it out. Class rivalry aside, he fully trusts Vlad's word. So he isn't really surprised to find scrubbing 1B's dorm top to bottom on top of heading to Hound Dog's office. Midoriya submits his own punishment without a fuss. He even manages to not break any bones doing so. It all seems to be turning out perfectly. A problem not quite snipped in the bud, but close to that. Cut off before the first blighted bloom could fully open, maybe. Too bad he can't say the same about the Midoriya and Bakugo problem. There's an age-old question of what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Midoriya and Bakugo do a good job of portraying both, switching roles whenever the situation calls for it. Currently, Bakugo is the unstoppable force, slamming into Midoriya's immovable surface in his ceaseless effort to apologize for whatever it is he did. Aizawa is fairly certain it's going to blow up in his face eventually, but he's weathered the fallout from the two kids praised for their quirks and pitted against each other into a deeply unhealthy rivalry before. He can do it again. He's fully expecting Bakugo to use Midoriya's punishment as an opportunity to pin him down. And he is. Well, he's trying to, at least. Class ends and Aizawa flops down on the ground for his usual post-school nap. Or so he lets his student think. He naps, yes, but only after all of the students have filtered out and class duties are all done. But letting his students think he's sleeping gives him the opportunity to observe them when they think he isn't watching, which is always useful, even if some people think it's kind of weird show, not gonna lie, and you could accomplish the same goal without compromising yourself with a well-placed camera and a listening device. Hisashi is clearly not seeing the benefits of this tactic, and Netsu might technically be right, but if he did things that way, not only would he have to stare at a screen for longer, which isn't ideal with chronic dry eye, but he'd also miss out on teaching his students valuable lessons about spatial awareness. Plus, there are plenty of small body language indicators a camera might miss, in addition to tone nuances a microphone won't pick up. More importantly, the current situation. Usually, Bakugo is one of the first out the door. But the day Aizawa announces that Midoriya will be taking on an extra share of classroom duties as punishment for the fight with Monoma, he can practically see Bakugo's ears perk up. And, unsurprisingly, Bakugo doesn't bolt out the school with the majority of the class at the end of the day. He lingers, looking like he's cataloging his school supplies, as Midoriya's friends hover around him while he starts cleaning up the classroom alongside the others assigned that day. "Are you sure you don't want us to help?" Uraraka quietly asks, eyes flicking to Aizawa. He continues his ruse of being fast asleep, eyes open the barest sliver to allow him to see his students. Midoriya smiles a little and shakes his head. "No, it's fine. It's my punishment. I shouldn't have hit him. He deserved it." "Uraraka-san! Don't advocate violence," Ida says. "We're hero students, though. Doesn't violence come with the job?" Asui adds in. Well, yes, but there's a difference between fighting villains and fighting our fellow classmates. It's against the rules to cause harm to another student in any matter outside of regulated training. No matter how insensitive, borderline cruel, and needlessly confrontational said fellow student is being, on a near constant basis, we simply cannot— You wanted to hit him too, didn't you, Ida? Ida sputters and flushes, whirling to Asui with his arms chopping. I cannot possibly. It would be completely inappropriate to— He definitely wanted to hit him, Uranaka says with a smirk. Ida sputters like a broken kettle and turns to her, our motions growing more frantic. Regardless of what my urges I may or may not have felt. It's okay, Ida. If Deku hadn't hit him, I would've. Uranaka-san! Honestly, I don't think I'd have been far behind her if Monoma had kept talking. Asui! Suyud-san! The girls make half-hearted effort to contain their giggles as Midoriya ducks his head, fighting a smile. Meanwhile, Bakugo packs up his pencils one by one. Aizawa is pretty sure he's organizing them by size in his pencil carrier. Guys, really, it's okay. I'm not saying Monoma didn't deserve it, but Ida's right. I still shouldn't have punched him. Not when I know Sensei will actually do something about it. The pencil snaps in Bakugo's grip. Midoriya's friends startle and turn. Midoriya startles. He does not turn. Bakugo ignores them all and gets up to throw out the pencil pieces. Seriously, it's only a few extra chores. Plus, it's not like I don't volunteer for this half the time anyway, right? Uranaka fidgets. I know, but— Her eyes flicker to Bakugo, so fast Aizawa barely catches it. More things that don't sit right. The con of covertly observing his students is that while it does let him know things, he needs to stay aware of it brings the things to his attention in a way that he can't exactly just ask them for clarification. Like just now in the barely there implication that whatever the bullying problem Midoriya's middle school had, teachers didn't handle it well. Or at all. There's no way to ask Midoriya when this happened, or with who. Not without showing his hand and damaging Midoriya's trust in him. He just has to trust that if there's something more to be done with the situation, then Midoriya will bring it to him. If that happens, Aizawa's going to start keeping an eye out for flying pigs, because that is more honestly more likely. Still, kids can't learn and grow if you don't give them the chance to try. He shakes off his musing and refocuses on his students. Ida, you said there was a bunch of paperwork to pick up, right? I'll start with that. If you won't let us help, then at least let us walk with you. Midoriya smiles, soft and a little shy. I mean, if you really want to, I wouldn't mind. Of course we do. You're our friend. Midoriya beams at them. Aizawa seriously considers if he should petition Nedzu to allow him to add sunglasses to a student's uniforms. With Midoriya around, they need them. The group of friends leave. Aizawa is unsurprised when Bakugo suddenly finishes inventorying his school supplies and follows after them. He's a good bit more surprised when, about 15 minutes later, Midoriya's head peeks through the window, cautiously scanning the room, before he reaches up to unlatch it. He watches Midoriya clamber through, holding a thick stack of papers. Midoriya catches him staring and blushes scarlet. Avoiding Bakugo. Yes. Don't you think this is a bit extreme? Mr. Principal said I could. Aizawa raises his eyebrows. Midoriya juggles the papers in one hand, miraculously not dropping any, and fumbles a different paper out of his pocket. He hands it to Aizawa and drops the stack of papers on the desk with a heavy thunk. Aizawa reads the note, reads it again, and then once more for good measure. The words don't change. He doesn't know why he hoped they would. Aizawa, Midoriya will be evading his problems via principal-sanctioned impromptu capture and evasion training. Okay then. Aizawa pockets the note and starts in on the paperwork. So it's okay? It's incredibly stupid and going to result in mass property damage, Aizawa thinks. I'm not fighting Nedzu, he says out loud. Besides, he usually has the students' best interests in mind, so he's probably not just going along with it because he thinks it'll be funny to watch. Besides, there's only just so many ways to escape the classroom. After Midoriya's display with the window, he probably should have guessed things wouldn't be so simple. He's expecting it to take Bakugo maybe a day or two to realize Midoriya is bailing out the windows and ambush him. He's not expecting Midoriya to think to escape through the vents or the ceiling tiles. It's an eventful week. With every passing day, Bakugo only grows more and more frustrated as he fails to trap Midoriya into holding still long enough to deliver his mysterious apology. At the very least, watching the two play cat and mouse is giving Aizawa valuable insight to some weaknesses on Bakugo's part and talent for evasion kids like Midoriya don't usually have. Still, this can't go on forever. He fully expects for Midoriya to either get tired of running away, or for Bakugo to finally manage to pin him down any day now. He's not expecting a different blonde to beat Bakugo to it. Aizawa is grading papers and letting himself enjoy the breeze from the window Midoriya has cracked open, presumably just in case he needs to bail out of it. Midoriya himself doesn't look like he has one eye out for Bakugo as he wipes down the windows, but by now, Aizawa knows he absolutely does. There's a knock at the door, which means it's probably not Bakugo. Even so, Midoriya clearly isn't taking any chances. It's a testament to how numb he's become to this kid's antics when he doesn't even blink as Midoriya nudges the window just far enough open to look like it wasn't accidentally closed all the way before silently yet swiftly climbing onto a desk and pushing a ceiling tile aside. "Come in," Aizawa says, ignoring Midoriya's stealthy climb into the ceiling. The door opens just as Midoriya resettles the ceiling tile into place. By the time the knocker enters the room, there's no sign the tile ever moved, and every indication that Midoriya went out the window. But, like he expected, it's not Bakugo who enters. It's a different blonde. Aizawa raises an eyebrow. "Monoma." "Sir?" "Do you need something?" Vlad is in the teacher's lounge, last I knew." "I was looking for Midoriya, actually, sir." "And why were you looking for him?" "To apologize. I heard his punishment for a fight was extra class duties, so I thought that it was my best bet to find him. Do you know where—" The tile in the ceiling shifts to the side and Midoriya swings down, sliding the tile back in place and landing in one neat movement. "If you're apologizing, you should probably apologize to Koda first." Monoma stares at him, mouth hanging open. Why were you—" "I thought you were someone else. Sorry." "So you climbed into the— How did you even get up there so fast?" Monoma stops and shakes his head. Never mind. I suppose it's not any of my business." "I mean, I guess not. It really isn't important. You really do need to apologize to Koda, though." I'm going to apologize him too. It's just that, well, he's probably with the rest of your class at your dorms, and I don't fancy my chances of being allowed anywhere near him under the current circumstances. However, if I were to have someone with me willing to fit my good intentions, I'll go with you to the dorms, but if you say anything cruel to him, I'll— "Tell me," Aizawa interrupts, fixing a stern look on his student, "and let me handle it." Midoriya has the good sense to be sheepish. "Yes, sensei." "Good. Now that that's settled," he casts a glance at Monoma. Monoma takes a deep breath and dips into a bow. Fists clenched and eyes squeezed shut, but sincere all the same. "Midoriya, I'm sorry. I spoke out of term, and my behavior was careless and callous to the situation. I apologize for allowing my own insecurities to lead me to behave in such a reprehensible way." Midoriya sputters a little, face going red as he ducks his head, but he holds steady. "Thank you, Monoma, and, sorry for breaking your nose?" Aizawa has about 3 seconds to indulge in a moment of satisfaction of watching two students grow as people, before it all goes to hell. "What the fuck?" comes Bakugo's voice from the doorway. Ah, shit, Aizawa thinks. Midoriya's face closes off as quickly and smoothly as a curtain yanked across a window. What the fuck? Bakugo spits again. Midoriya's shoulders go back and his spine straightens like someone threaded an iron rod through it. Kacchan, he says, voice flat. You'll let him apologize, but not me? He didn't do anything to you! I don't know what rock you've been under, but we had a fight, Monoma starts, only to quickly be cut off. Fuck off! I'm not talking to you! Monoma puffs up like an angry cat. Excuse me? Bakugo ignores him. I've been trying to pin you down for weeks, and you put nothing but dodge me and brush me off. Because I don't want to talk about it. Well, I do! Oh, and it's always been about what you want, isn't it? Never mind if I just want to forget about it. Never mind if I already said I forgive you. How the fuck are you supposed to forgive someone who hasn't even apologized? Never mind how I feel about it if I want to just leave all of that in the past where it belongs. How can it be in the past if you won't give me the chance to apologize and put it behind me? It's clear. The boys have forgotten their audience in the heat of their argument. Monoma makes the wise decision to back away slowly as the two boys begin raising their voices, fury sparking in their every move. His eyes flicker around for some kind of guidance. Aizawa catches him by the shoulder. Monoma twitches but doesn't flinch, turning his head just enough to see Aizawa without losing sight of the arguing powerhouses in front of him. Aizawa spares just enough thought to acknowledge it as smart instincts, even if he's fairly certain neither Bakugo nor Midoriya are the types to lose control and endanger bystanders. He jerks his chin towards the door. Go wait in the teacher's lounge. We'll handle your apology to Koda once I'm done here. Mono flickers one glance back at the furious pair in front of him and obeys. Aizawa gives him just enough attention to make sure he really leaves, and then returns his full focus to the argument unfolding in front of him, waiting to see if it escalates to a point he needs to intervene. Oh, so I can't be hurt by something that didn't directly happen to me, but you can? Fuck off! You know what I mean! Sorry, I must have forgotten that Kacchan's feelings are the only ones that matter! I didn't fucking say that! It sure feels like that! I'm trying to apologize! Well, I don't need you to! Bakugo purses his lips and swallows a shriek. Midoriya glares him down. There's a brief moment where Aizawa almost thinks he'll storm off, and then Bakugo bursts out with, Why won't you just let me apologize? Not everything is about you! I'm pretty fucking sure that I'm about half involved in this. Midoriya barks out an ugly laugh. Half? You think you were even half of back then? From what I remember I was. From what you remember? From what you remember? Aizawa has never heard Midoriya's voice go so cold. There's something dark in Midoriya's tone. Something ugly. Aizawa's eyes dart between the two boys, wondering if he should go ahead and step in. You know what I remember, Kacchan? I remember the week you were out sick with the flu, and your friends thought it would be so funny to organize a memorial for me. What? Aizawa doesn't freeze often, but he freezes now. Underneath the shock, Bakugo looks like he might be sick. Aizawa himself is torn somewhere between the kind of rage that burns buildings down and being sick himself. They got the whole class involved. There was a funeral portrait. Speeches. They laid funeral flowers all over my desk while I was still sitting in it. And that, Kacchan, wasn't just one day for them. That was every chance they got. Fat tears roll down Midoriya's face, choking his voice, but he continues on. And yeah, you weren't great back then. You were an absolute jerk. Bakugo, who of course doesn't know when to quit, cuts in. Don't fucking sugarcoat it. I was a fucking bully. Yeah, you were a bully, Kacchan. You were. But I'm so fucking sick of you sitting here and brooding over the one time you did when the whole school spent every day doing. Every day? Yeah, Kachan, every day. A note in my locker, someone saying it just loud enough for me to hear, scribbled on my desk or my classwork. Every single day, Kachan. I'm pretty sure some of the seniors made it a rite of passage for the underclassmen. Midoriya pauses, panting for breath. Bakugo stands silent. He breathes hard as Midoriya, eyes flickering about like he's just now putting together a puzzle that's been right in front of him for years. Aizawa envies him because he has no clue what's happening. What happened to cause this? What made Midoriya a target for a bullying campaign that was apparently school-wide? What the fuck were his teachers doing? Why didn't they stop it? Why didn't anyone try to step in? He knows that sometimes there simply isn't any rhyme or reason to bullying. That sometimes it truly is random. But more often there's some random little thing held up for justification of something that can never truly be justified. When Midoriya speaks again, it's barely more than a whisper compared to his earlier yelling. Somehow, it's worse. You know, Kachan, you were fucking awful. But I was always almost grateful. Because at least with you, I knew you hated me because of who I was, not what. There's always a chance our personalities would change as we got older and you wouldn't hate me anymore. Because I was always going to be quirkless. The stupidest thing of all of that, amidst all the horror of that first thing Aizawa finds himself thinking is, but Midoriya has a quirk. Almost on autopilot, Aizawa steps in, putting a hand on both their shoulders. The boys jump in unison as they're forcibly reminded that everything they just said had an audience. Midoriya goes white, eyes widening as the rest of his face goes slack. Bakugo's face twists somewhere between horror and something Aizawa thinks might be guilt. Hopefully it's guilt, given everything he just heard. Okay, I think that's enough. You two need to step back, cool off, and I think I'm also going to need you two to explain some of the things I just heard. Excuse me, Sensei, Midoriya says, faster than Aizawa can process his words. He slides out from under Aizawa's shoulder and bolts. Midoriya! Aizawa starts, but Midoriya is gone before the word even leaves Aizawa's mouth. He takes a step towards the door, but the telltale crackle of Midoriya's quirk activating, and he knows there's no way he's stopping him without chasing him down. Which he can't, because he needs to deal with Bakugo. Only he doesn't know how to deal with Bakugo. Koda's situation is different, simpler, open and shut. Beyond the sickening mistreatment of their peers, the students who bullied Koda broke UA's very clear and well-known rules against bullying within or outside the school. Rules which do not apply to past actions unless they were documented, which Aizawa knows they weren't. Because if they were, Bakugo would have never set foot on UA as an applicant, much less a student. He closes his eyes and brings his now free hand to pinch the bridge of his nose. And none of that even touches just how emotionally compromised he is right now. This isn't just some student whose ugly past is getting drug up. It's his student, one he's risked life and reputation for more than once. Sensei! Sit down, Bakugo. Sit down. Aizawa forces himself to take another slow breath. Please, he adds belatedly. Bakugo's mouth shuts with a click. He drops into the nearest desk, hands curled tightly into fists on top of his desk. His eyes burn into the surface like he's trying to set it on fire with his eyes instead of his hands. He stays like that the entire 5 solid minutes it takes Aizawa to wrestle some form of composure back. All right, he tells himself, one of your students has something bizarre going on, which you do not have enough information to deal with. And the other... Am I expelled? Bakugo asks, far calmer than Aizawa expects from him. especially when he's seen firsthand how much Bakugo wants to be a hero. And the other, you are too incandescently furious and disappointed in to make a rational decision right now. Aizawa forces the deepest breath he can and lets it out soft and slow. Bakugo waits with patience Aizawa has never seen from him. I don't know yet, Aizawa says at last, sounding calmer than he expected to. What does that mean? It means that I am currently too angry, too confused, and too disappointed. He just barely catches the way Bakugo flinches at that. In you, to trust myself to make a decision right now. He pauses. Bakugo stays silent, eyes on his hands. Aizawa sighs and continues. I also don't feel like I have all the facts yet, and I prefer to make important decisions with as many of the facts as possible. So, you're going to sit here and wait for someone to come escort you to Nezu's office. I am going to go find Midoriya and bring him to Nezu's office. And then I'll sit down with Nezu and we will come to a decision on how to move forward. He half expects Bakugo to snap, snarl, rage, anything. But he keeps his burning eyes on the desk and says, Yes, Sensei. There's no time to examine Bakugo's reaction, because not giving the time to look into students acting strangely has worked out so well, he thinks. The thought'll lash against himself. He forces himself to nod, short and curt. He reaches into one of his pockets and pulls out a small pack of tissues. He places it on the desk and then walks out of the room. He shuts the door between himself and the boy that might not be his student for much longer with a soft click. When he pulls the phone from his pocket, he's unsurprised to find both a text from Hound Dog telling him he's on his way, and another from Nezu consisting only of a location in the school and the words, I sent Yagi to him. He doesn't bother sending an acknowledgement. Nezu already knows he's seen it and he's on his way. Midoriya has himself holed up in a storage room a few floors above the floor 1A's classroom is on. From the look of things, this is at least one of the places he's been hiding from Bakugo all week. It's a good choice. There's nothing in here but extra festival supplies. With no festivals coming up, there's no reason for anyone to come in here. If it weren't for Nezu, they'd probably still be looking for him. Yagi is seated on the ground next to Midoriya, which can't be good for him. But he can't fault Yagi for it, not when Midoriya is crumpled into his side like he's trying to merge with it. He's not crying, which is somehow worse. Yagi is the only one to notice him, at first. All things considered, Aizawa isn't surprised. Without a word, he sits down in front of them. He meets Yagi's eyes. There's a muted rage burning there, but mostly the man looks tired and painfully sad. Yagi looks down at Midoriya, face softening. There's something about his expression, something so gentle and loving, that makes Aizawa feel like it's not for his eyes. Aizawa is here, young Midoriya, Yagi says softly. For a moment, Midoriya gives no sign of having heard him, then he shifts, slowly uncurling enough to look at Aizawa. Sorry for running off. Given the circumstances, it's understandable. Midoriya drops his eyes to the ground, but gives a tiny nod and uncurls a bit more. I guess you probably have some questions? He has so many questions. A few, he says. But I told you before that I wouldn't force you to tell me if you were uncomfortable, and I stand by that. However, given the circumstances, if you're not comfortable telling me, I need you to find someone you are comfortable telling. Is Kacchan going to be expelled? Midoriya blurts out. Yagi's eyes flicker with repressed anger, and Aizawa can read a furious disappointment in the thin press of his lips. Ah, Yagi knows then. Do you think he should be? Aizawa asks, eyes flicking back to Midoriya. I don't want to be the reason he doesn't become a hero. If young Bakugo is expelled, it is because of his actions and his choices, not you, Yagi says, firm but gentle. I know, but... He's right. You are in no way responsible for any of the consequences Bakugo will face for his actions. You're gonna expel him, then, Midoriya whispers. A decision hasn't been made yet. If you don't want him to be expelled, that'll be taken into account, but I can't promise he won't be expelled. Midoriya's eyes trail back to the floor as he curls up a little tighter, but he nods and gives them a tiny, okay. Aizawa gives him a moment and then continues on. Now, about the things you mentioned in your argument with Bakugo. Are you comfortable telling me, or would you rather me bring in someone else? No, I want to... Midoriya flickers a glance up at Yagi, who smiles encouragingly down at him and nods. It's your choice, young Midoriya. Midoriya nods back at him and turns to Aizawa. There's fire back in his eyes, and Aizawa is relieved, in spite of the cryptic conversation. I want to tell you. All of it. Okay. It's not a pleasant tale. Aizawa wasn't expecting it to be one, but it's still an upsettingly ugly tale. He listens to Midoriya tell him what life was like before he was medically diagnosed quirkless. Something that is not in his file, and something that is still confusing the hell out of Aizawa. There should at least be some kind of retraction there. At least some footnote somewhere to warn him that, hey, this kid didn't have a quirk most of his life. Not just nothing. Unless there was a reason. Unless there is something to hide. But Aizawa keeps those thoughts to himself and lets Midoriya talk. He stutters and stumbles his way through the whole sordid tale, summarizing years of torment. Somewhere along the line, Yagi lays one gentle hand over Midoriya's, and the boy instantly snags Yagi's hand in a death grip. He pales, yelps out an apology, and tries to let go, but Yagi is having none of it. He keeps hold of Midoriya's hand, giving it a soft squeeze. Midoriya gives in quickly, shooting Yagi a small and soft but sincere smile before continuing on. Every word out of Midoriya's mouth stokes the fire in Aizawa's chest. Despite the pains Yagi is taking to be supportive, Aizawa can tell it's the same for him. It seems impossible to get his mind around. Daily bullying from his classmates, from his teachers, from every other student in the school, from the fucking principal. If they weren't joining in themselves, they were standing back and just letting it happen, outright denying that it could possibly be as bad as it was. It makes Aizawa want to scream. And Bakugo? He finds himself asking during one of Midoriya's more lengthy pauses. Kachan was my friend. At first, at least I think he was. He was never nice. But he wasn't cruel until his quirk came in. Until people started to fill his head with this idea that he was the next number one waiting to happen. Midoriya nods slowly. Kachan doesn't show it, but he's scared. Deep down. Everyone praised him growing up, but it always came with these expectations. And Kachan can't stand failing. Can't stand the idea that he'll fail to measure up. And he decided to take that out on you. I think I made him mad, because even when Midoriya stops and glances at Yagi, Yagi gives him a tiny nod, squeezing his hand again. Midoriya takes in a slow breath and lets it out again. His voice shakes and trembles, but he didn't stop once he started. Because I never gave up on being a hero, even when I got diagnosed as quirkless. What? Aizawa thinks. He's almost shocked enough to open his mouth and ask how that's possible when Midoriya's sitting right in front of him with a quirk so powerful it breaks him on a regular basis. But a sharp look and tiny shake of his head from Yagi quells the urge. He's right. It's taken so much for Midoriya to start talking about this. He can't risk him clamming up now. Even when everyone else gave up on being his friend and just worshipped him instead, I still insisted on standing by him. I kept reaching out, kept trying to stay by his side. Eventually he just snapped. I don't know why exactly, but I think maybe it was something like if someone's so weak, someone everyone thought was worthless, thought Kachan needs his help, then how could he ever think he'd measure up to everyone's expectations? Midoriya falls silent. When it's clear he's done for now, Aizawa stows his questions about how the hell Midoriya could get medically diagnosed quirkless and end up here with a quirk as powerful as this one, when Aizawa already knows the bullying continued up until he graduated middle school. That doesn't make it okay, he says instead of the questions fighting to break free. No, Midoriya whispers, blinking away tears. It doesn't. I think it makes it worse, actually. I'm sorry, my boy, Yagi says softly. It's not your fault. Still, you shouldn't have had to go through all that. You never should have been treated that way. Midoriya stares at his knees for a moment, then raises his eyes to meet Aizawa's. You probably have questions. About my quirk? They can wait, Aizawa says, even though he feels like a dam about to burst. No, it's fine. My quirk is a special situation. I'm not necessarily a late bloomer. It's more like my quirk was, given to me? Given to you, he says, trying not to let the fear leak into his voice as his mind immediately flicks to the Nomu and the multitude of quirks inside them. Of all the people he's seen, heard of, and occasionally personally stopped, had an unhealthy interest in seeing how quirks worked and what could be done with them from a genetic standpoint. It was my quirk, Yagi says, making every half-baked panic theory building up in Aizawa's head fall flat on their faces. What? My quirk. Passed down to me by my master who received it from her master, and so on, 9 times, all the way to the dawn of quirks. It's called One for All. It stockpiles power and copies the quirks of previous holders, apparently. All Might chose me to be his successor my last year of middle school. I had to train like crazy all year, so I'd be able to receive it in time for the entrance exam. There's so much about that sentence causing Aizawa personal pain. But there's one particular bit niggling him at most. In time for the exam. Yes? Aizawa has a terrible feeling. How long before the exam did you... He can't believe these words are leaving his mouth. Inherit the quirk? Well, the day before? Midoriya squeaks, suddenly finding the ceiling very interesting. Aizawa, remembering that Midoriya broke 3 limbs in that exam when he used his apparently brand fucking new quirk, looks over at Yagi. Yagi coughs. We, obviously weren't expecting such an explosive debut. Otherwise I would have sought out another solution. I should hope so. The 3 of them sit there in awkward silence. Midoriya slowly gives up his study of the ceiling to watch Aizawa out of the corners of his eyes. Yagi frets, fiddling with his hands. Aizawa ignores all of this, just trying to process that one of his students went 15 years of his life getting bullied for a genetic, elephant, happenstance, coincidence, random thing, beyond his control, until he was given a quirk that dates back to the dawn of quirks. A quirk that was given to him by the then #1 hero and most beloved hero of all time. And that's not even mentioning the fact that one of the people who bullied his student is another one of his current students. One moment, Aizawa says. He steps outside the room, closes the door, and crushes his face into his hands. He inhales as much as he can, and then exhales slowly, repeating the process until the urge to scream is at a manageable level. He drops his hands and stares at the ceiling for a moment. Then he lifts one hand in the direction of the nearest camera and flips it off. He schools himself back to calmness and goes back into the room. Midoriya's eyes flick up to him, then back down to where he's picking at his nails. There's, more stuff that goes along with One for All. Oh god, no, please have mercy, Aizawa thinks. But, I think that can wait for now. Is it likely to cause you or anyone else harm within the next few days? Probably not. Midoriya glances at Yagi, who thinks about it for a moment. Please, just give me this one thing. I think it's as stable as the situation can get for the moment. Okay, alright. Then we move on to dealing with Bakugo. Midoriya grimaces at the floor. Aizawa reaches forward and puts a hand on Midoriya's shoulder. Midoriya reluctantly looks up at him. Midoriya, I need you to understand that whatever happens, whatever decision is made, it is not your fault or your responsibility. Midoriya swallows hard. Okay, he says softly. Principal Nezu is waiting for us. I'm sure he's already called your mother, so she should be on her way. Midoriya nods again, numb and quiet, and they filter out of the room. They haven't gotten more than a dozen steps before Yagi and his text alerts go off.
It's Vlad, requesting help with getting past the rest of Class 1A so Monoma can give his apology to Koda. Man faces villains every day, but can't face down less than 24 teens. Aizawa huffs. Yagi just chuckles.
Just imagine how the villains will feel once the kids are out on the streets. I can help Vlad. He glances over to Midoriya. That is, as long as you're comfortable continuing on alone, young Midoriya. I'm sure Vlad can hold his own against the class. Midoriya shakes his head. No, I can handle it. Don't let the class make Vlad-sensei cry again. Again? Aizawa and Yagi ask. Midoriya freezes and glances away quickly. I think Principal Nezu has waited long enough, right? I want to know more about that later, Aizawa says. So I can find footage and save it for blackmail. From the twinkle in Yagi's eye as he says his goodbyes, Aizawa feels he probably knows exactly what he's thinking. They're about halfway to Principal Nezu's office when Aizawa finally finds the word to say what he needs to say. Thank you, Aizawa says, because it feels like the right thing to say. Midoriya's eyes go big as his head whips toward him. He stares. Sensei, for what? For trusting me with this, for telling me. I realize I'm not the most soft person, and considering your history with teachers, you have even less reason to trust me than most students. You could have easily just never told me. So, thank you for your trust, and I'm sorry. Midoriya only looks more shell-shocked. Aizawa presses on before he can panic. I looked at your quirk and made a lot of assumptions about you. In a way, I'm no different than your past teachers. No! Midoriya blurts out. He looks mortified, but just as determined. No, Sensei, you're amazing! You've saved my life multiple times, and you never treat me any different than the other kids. You're always so kind. Midoriya, I literally threatened to expel someone on the first day. I almost actually expelled you for not mastering a quirk you'd just gotten. But it wasn't because it was me. It's always because it was me. You gave me the same chances everyone else did. You've never graded me off a different answer sheet or given me a different test than anyone else. Every time I've always said trouble in class was because of something I did, not just because I'm me. There's an odd kind of grief boiling in Aizawa's stomach, because Aizawa knows he isn't an easy person or an easy teacher. He's never been called a kind teacher before, and there's a reason for that. The most he can say is he's fair. At least as fair as he can be with the occasionally limited information. Students have left his class in tears before, and only some of them have come back. And he doesn't regret that. Heroism is not a safe job, or an easy one, and he doesn't want a single student of his to leave his classroom believing otherwise. But for Midoriya, Aizawa who has and will continue to expel students who don't take training to be a hero seriously, Aizawa who is known for throwing his students off the edge of a cliff and telling them to figure out how to fly on the way down, Aizawa who has done nothing but completely misunderstand Midoriya and make despairing assumptions about Midoriya for months, is what a kind teacher looks like. Because he does his job right and has basic human decency. I'm the one who should be apologizing anyway, Midoriya says. You have nothing to apologize for. I didn't tell you the truth. I made you feel like you're bad at your job. I didn't give you any reason to trust me. You risked your life for the class, for me. Eraserhead risked his life. As your teacher, I looked at you and saw yet another kid with a powerful physical quirk raised on a pedestal, for better or for worse. And because I couldn't see past my own biases, I wasn't able to do anything when your past was hurting you. I'm fine, though, Midoriya whispers. Jar. Midoriya comes to an abrupt stop. But I am, though. It's over. It's done. It can't happen again. I have a quirk and actual friends. I have teachers and mentors who won't just sit by and watch it happen again. My only old classmate in the entire school is Kachan, and he's not going to do any of it again. I'm perfectly safe. It's over. It's over. Midoriya's chest heaves. Fresh tears prickle in his eyes. I'm fine. I'm safe. Everything is fine now. Aizawa crouches down slowly and places his hands on Midoriya's shoulders. Midoriya, it's over. It is, but that doesn't mean it isn't still hurting you. I just want it to be over. I know, Aizawa says, and then stops. What can he say to that? Of course, Midoriya wants to put this behind him. Of course he wants it to be over. He's finally escaped years of torment. Of course he wants to just shove it all in a box and ignore it. I know you do, but if you try to ignore it, if you try to pretend it never happened, it won't ever be over. It'll just be there, waiting for something to remind you. For you to let your guard down. And I know it's not fair. None of it ever should have happened to you. But it did. And now all you can do is face it. Midoriya squeezes his eyes shut. I'm just so angry. I don't know what to do with it. I don't know. A sob cuts him off. He doesn't know what instinct trips him into doing it. It must be one, because it's certainly not a conscious decision. He reaches out and drags Midoriya into a hug. The tight, enveloping kind, like you're trying to pull them into your chest and hide them away from the pain. The way Midoriya stutters and breaks into an ugly sob makes something in his chest crack in half. Midoriya cries, loud, wet, ugly sobs, and Aizawa doesn't count the minutes. They pass, and Midoriya cries, and Aizawa waits, wondering what kind of half-thought-out bullshit instinct pushed him to hug someone. This is Hizashi's fault. He's sure of it. When Midoriya's crying dies down to wet sniffles against his shirt, Aizawa asks, Are you ready to go talk to Nezu, or would you rather wait? Midoriya shakes his head and wipes his face. Aizawa reaches into one of his many pockets and pulls him the pack with tissues. I just want to get it over with as fast as possible. All right, he says, and guides them the rest of the way to the principal's office. Outside Nezu's office, they find Bakugo, seated and waiting in the chairs lining the wall. Midoriya's mother sits not too far away, eyes on the wall and her hands clenched around a handkerchief in her lap like she can't bear to look at the boy beside her. Bakugo stares at the floor like he himself can't bear to look at her, if for different reasons. Midoriya Inko is quick to jump up when she sees her son shuffle in behind Aizawa. He leaves Midoriya in her capable hands, watching as she cups his face and whispers things he can't catch and doesn't try to. Aizawa tears his eyes from Bakugo and continues on into Nezu's office. Nezu's office is alight with dozens of screens, and there are piles of paper dotted about like a bomb went off. He can spot several discarded cups scattered about, a sure sign of how affected Nezu is by all of this. If there's one thing Nezu hates, it's people who hurt someone who can't fight back. But, in spite of the personal feelings, Aizawa knows he'll make as fair a judgment as he can. Sir.
Good! You're here! We don't have much time before Bakugo's parents arrive, and I'd prefer if we knew how to plan to move forward before that.
Nezu finishes catching Aizawa up to speed just in time for the Bakugos to arrive, which is heralded by a quick knock and Yagi sticking his head into the room just in time for Midoriya Inko's voice to shake the foundations of the room with a ringing, "How dare you!" Yagi winces. Young Bakugo's parents are here. He rushes out and then ducks back out of the room. Nezu and Aizawa glance at each other and stand up, making for the door. The sounds of arguing are muffled behind it, but it's clear that Midoriya Inko is giving Bakugo's parents a piece of her mind. Bakugo Mitsuki is looking almost comically shocked, mouth hanging open and arms limp at her sides. It's not so surprising. He's only met Midoriya Inko once or twice and hardly interacted with her either time, but she didn't strike him as a particularly loud or angry person. If Bakugo's parents have known her since their children were young, it's possible they've never seen her angry enough to yell at this.
Ask me to tell them to be lenient with your son after what he helped do to Izuku!
Bakugo Masaru flinches, even though his eyes are already on the floor, shoulders curled in shame as his hands wring together. Nezu is quick to step in and quiet both families down. He's, thankfully, much better at getting people to calm down and cooperate than Aizawa himself. Once both families are settled on opposite sides of the rooms, he says,
"All right, now that everyone is here, I have to ask you all to please wait a bit longer while we come to a decision on how we will be proceeding forward. The situation came to light very suddenly, and we've only just finished reviewing everything. Please be patient with us."
In an unquestioned agreement, Yagi sits in the many chairs between the families to stay behind to supervise the families. Bakugo Mitsuki looks like she's going to object, stopped only by her husband's hand on her arm and a soft, "Mitsuki, please." Midoriya Inko, on the other hand, just nods stiffly, one hand still clenched in her handkerchief and the other tangled with her son's hand. Her eyes burn, and Aizawa has the thought that he might not be at risk of losing only one student today. A glance at Nezu as they close the office door behind themselves tells him that he already knows that. It takes what feels like an eternity to come to a decision, and even when they do, Aizawa isn't sure it's the right one. Miraculously, it's dead silent outside the office. They can only hope it doesn't mean Midoriya Inko has found a way to quietly murder the Bakugos. At the very least, Yagi's moral dilemma over it would have made some noise. Both families and Yagi shuffle in, as separated as possible in the chairs arranged in front of Nezu's desk. There's no sign of the whirlwind of research that just went on moments before. Papers and cups are cleared, screens put away. Nezu has but a single cup of tea sitting neatly off to the side on a coaster. Midoriya Inko sits ramrod straight in her chair. Midoriya still tightly clenching one of her hands. Her eyes are red-rimmed and shiny, but it does nothing to dim the angry aura that surrounds her. Bakugo's mother is stiff but silent, her hands clenched around her purse. His father has his hands clasped in his lap, shoulders hunched. Bakugo sits ridged between them, eyes on Nezu as he waits for the principal to give his decision.
Technically speaking, by the rules, Bakugo, you should never have stepped foot on this campus. Had your teachers or any other member of the faculty at your past schools done their due diligence, your application would have been among the first round of rejections.
Bakugo doesn't react to this. His mother's jaw clenches and his father's hands tighten, tears pricking at his eyes. But Bakugo doesn't blink, let alone look away from where Nezu is staring him down.
This is, of course, only technically speaking. The reality of the situation is far more complicated. If you were simply a bully who had slipped through the cracks and managed to camouflage yourself to this point, you wouldn't even be sitting in this office right now. I would have already sent you home with your bags packed and the ink drying on your expulsion paperwork. I have not done that, and I want you and your parents.
His eyes twitch to Bakugo's mother. Her eyes twitch in a muted flinch.
To know that this is not because of your potential or the training you've already received. This is because your past teachers did not do their jobs.
At this, Bakugo's eyebrows furrow, just a tiny bit. Nezu reaches down below his desk and pulls out a massive file, the manila folder practically begging for mercy.
Their handling of the bullying you and the majority of your classmates heaped on Midoriya was unacceptable even before we take into account their own participation. But besides failing Midoriya in that regard, they failed you as well when they not only made no effort to correct your behavior, but instead encouraged it. Make no mistake, I plan to personally ensure that they are not only stripped of their teaching licenses, but also barred from re-entry to any position that would give them power over another vulnerable person.
There's a tiny spark of satisfaction in Midoriya Inko's eyes, but she's still watching the two of them like a bear watching a very stupid tourist try to play with her cubs.
For Bakugo themselves, I believe your behavior has been encouraged and exacerbated at every turn and every opportunity, and judging by the fact that nearly immediately upon receiving your first correction at UA, your behavior has seen improvement, however small it may have been, I believe it proves you do have the ability to do better. Additionally, Midoriya himself, the main victim of your actions, has not requested you be expelled on his behalf.
Midoriya Inko glances at her son, who shoots her a pleading look. She purses her lips, but squeezes his hand and stays silent.
But while I want to believe Bakugo has changed and will continue to change for the better, and wish to grant him the opportunity to do so, I can't, in good conscience, allow him to run around unchecked around his past victim. So, I believe I've arrived at a compromise that will satisfy everyone.
Aizawa hands both families a folder. If Bakugo wants to stay a student of this school, you need to agree to him being placed on probation. He's not expecting the Bakugos to be happy, and they certainly aren't, even though it's not the expulsion they certainly should expect. After all, it's barely a step above expulsion. He's less sure about the elder Midoriya's reaction, but a quick glance at her shows she's still watching and waiting. Bakugo's mother bristles at the pages while her husband blanches. This is, he gapes at it, eyes bulging behind his glasses as he looks between Aizawa and Nezu, as if hoping this is some sort of prank. This is ridiculous, is what it is. You can't honestly expect us to agree to this. She slaps the paper back down on her desk. Midoriya Inko watches her, as if Bakugo Mitsuki has an inch of self-preservation in her. She'd be able to feel those furious eyes on her.
Would you prefer I simply expelled him? Nezu asks sweetly.
Bakugo Mitsuki's mouth snaps shut. Bakuro Masaru is quick to step in. No, of course not. But you have to agree these terms are extreme. Despite how his parents look at the paper like it's venomous, Bakugo picks it up and begins reading.
No, I don't think I do agree with that at all. I think, considering the circumstances, it's quite generous. Remember that your son has, on one confirmable situation, suicide-baited Midoriya and caused him both mental and physical harm on many other occasions. And that's only what I was able to find evidence of on short notice.
How can you expect him to never use his quirk?
outside of class exercises and medical necessity. It would be counterproductive to sabotage his class performances, and I'm perfectly aware he needs to get rid of excess explosive fluid before it builds up and turns everything he touches into a bomb. You can't expect him to stay locked up in the dorms. And I haven't, Nezu snaps, hands coming up to rest on his desk. If you would please direct your attention to the exact wording of the proposed probation, you would see he is specifically forbidden from leaving campus for leisure reasons, unless he is visiting home. Considering what has been brought to light, these are, of course, perfectly understandable restrictions. We can't trust his character at the moment in time, and we can't monitor him for infractions outside of the school. But we are not monsters, and I have no desire to keep him from his family.
Bakugo Mitsuki allows herself to be pulled back into her chair by her husband. Midoriya Inko just continues to silently watch the interactions, between reading the exact details of their proposal. Nezu continues on.
Of course, if you choose to go on a family outing, you'll be required to report when and where. And naturally, I'd recommend not going anywhere that will make it difficult to check up on his behavior, since that would look highly suspicious.
From the way the sour look on Bakugo Mitsuki's face doubles, Aizawa can guess that was her exact plan, petty and useless as it'd be.
Therapy with regular updates on his progress, non-invasive of course, is a given. We don't just need him to look like he's doing better. We need to know he is. If we're going to put the license to use his abilities on other people in his hands,
and telling everyone he interns with during his probation about his private business, Bakugo Mitsuki hisses.
Everyone being anyone interested in taking him on as an intern and his teachers. And his private business being only that which has a very public effect on the people around him. They are, after all, risking their reputations by taking him on, to say nothing of their moral compasses.
Moral compasses? Bakugo Mitsuki shrieks. Aizawa opens his mouth to interject, but to his shock, Yagi beats him to it. As has already been said, young Bakugo suicide-baited young Midoriya, and he's going to be his classmate for the next 3 years, not to mention a co-worker for the rest of their careers. Not only that, but we're now aware that he's hurt young Midoriya many times, for years, when young Midoriya had little to no way of defending himself. And if he chose to, he'd face far worse consequences for trying to defend himself, and whoever else your son's rage fell on, then your son did. Yagi's mouth snapped shut, jaw clenched. Aizawa takes his cue to step in. The people who teach him and the heroes who are interested in mentoring him have every right to this information. Yuei's reputation is already, to put it lightly, nearly in the trash. Continuing to teach your son is a risk Yuei does not have to take. But, somehow, even if your objections had any merit, I don't think they'd matter. What do you mean, don't? Bakugo stands up and lays the probation agreement on the desk. Nezu lightly hands him a pen. Bakugo Katsuki! Bakugo ignores his mother and signs. He holds the pen in the air when he's done. I'm not signing that, his mother hisses. Bakugo Masaru stands up and gently pulls the pen from his son's fingers. Masaru! Bakugo's mother yells. Mitsuki, you know I love you, but I'm not throwing away our son's dreams for your pride. And they're right. When he's done, he needs to prove he's someone worthy of calling himself a hero. I want him to have that chance. I want him to be better. Bakugo Masaru signs under his son's name and then bows as he hands both pen and paper to Nezu. Thank you for taking a chance on my son, he says. Bakugo Masaru puts his hand on his son's back, and for once, Bakugo willingly bows, right beside his father. Thank you for the opportunity, he says.
You're welcome, Bakugo. Don't squander it.
I won't, Bakugo says, fire in his eyes. His father leads him out the door, his mother stalking furiously along beside them. Midoriya Inko watches them go and then turns those burning eyes on Nezu. He meets her heads on.
Before we continue, I do have one thing I'd like to discuss with you. I'd like to suggest Midoriya be placed in therapy to address his mistreatment. We will, of course, pay for his treatment. And if I don't plan to keep my son in school with his old bully? Regardless, and if you plan to allow Midoriya to continue to study with us, I'd still like to offer to pay for his therapy, Nezu says smoothly. Midoriya Inko regards him for a moment, before turning much softer eyes on her son. He looks at her with pleading eyes, squeezing her hand tightly. Yagi places a hand on Midoriya's shoulder, exchanging quick but meaningful looks Aizawa can't begin to decipher with both Midoriya's. Midoriya Inko closes her eyes and sighs. She turns to Nezu and Aizawa. Can you promise me this will actually not be handled the way Izuku's past schools did? Nezu nods. I do, but I understand my words alone may not reassure you, which is why I've included a document for us both to sign to legally bind my word. If I don't hold to it, you will have every ability to take me to court. She takes a slow breath and lets it back out again. I'm going to hold you to that, she says, and reaches for a pen. Midoriya bursts into tears. Yagi passes his shoulder with a soft smile as Midoriya's mother signs the paper and passes it to Nezu to sign as well. It doesn't take Nezu and Midoriya's mother long to dot the I's and cross the T's. As Midoriya Inko leads her son out of the room, he glances over his shoulder and meets Aizawa's eyes. He smiles at him, something wobbly and hesitant, but sincere, as he vanishes out the door. In the ensuing silence, Nezu chirps, Well, I think that went well. Aizawa lets what feels like all of the air in his lungs out, and drops his elbow to his knees, pressing his thumbs into the space between his eyes. Yagi looks no better, head nearly between his knees. I think I'd rather go toe-to-toe with All for One again than learn anything like that has happened to a student again, Yagi says. It goes unsaid that the whole situation is that much worse for Yagi because of who it's involved. Nezu comes over to pat his shoulder and push a cup of tea into his hands. Was this the right call? Aizawa asks, voice ragged, as Nezu pushes a cup of tea into him as well. Time will tell, Nezu says. Before Aizawa goes to check in on the kids before lights out, he's surprised to find Midoriya and Bakugo in the kitchen together. They're not talking and hardly looking at each other, but them existing in the same room together is more than he thought he'd see them doing it any time soon. Possibly ever. He hesitates in the shadow of the doorway, watching for a bit. Midoriya stands in front of the fine list, counting out yen in his hand, as Bakugo stands a few feet away, waiting for his tea to steep. As Aizawa watches, Midoriya scoots a few feet closer to deposit his money, hopefully just for when he's claimed to be fined during this nightmare of a moment earlier. Before Midoriya has time to step away, Bakugo reaches out and silently places a cup of tea in Midoriya's reach. Midoriya startles, glancing up at Bakugo. Aizawa can't read the look that passes between them as they sit silently in the kitchen together, drinking tea. As the two boys sit there in the dim light and nurse their cups together, in a quiet place, Aizawa allows himself a brief moment of fierce pride in their resolve to heal. He looks at them and lets himself believe that even if they're nowhere near fine today, that one day they will be. Chapter 10. The kids are all right. For once. Summary, in which messages are received and answered and a tradition is born. I don't usually read the notes, but this one kind of sums up our entire feeling about the entire second half of this book. Beginnings and ends and beginnings, and fics that were supposed to be crack, damn it! Onto the book. You can expect your average teacher to look to the days following the Midoriya and Bakugo situation and hope some peace and quiet. Just a little, because even they won't bother being expecting more than that. Aizawa's not the average teacher. Aizawa knows better than to even expect that much. He fully expects the next school day to consist of fun activities, such as accidentally stabbing your friends into a fun class hobby, or for Kaminari to discover that you can, in fact, create what is basically a human electrical circuit. And for that discovery to immediately go horribly, horribly wrong. Or maybe even a classic broken boner 5. And yet, somehow, against all odds and expectations,
A few quiet days is exactly what Aizawa gets. Nothing more than the usual bruises and scrapes typical of a rowdy group of teenagers. The fine jar collects a few fines here and there, but nothing significant. It's nice, quiet, peaceful. Aizawa doesn't trust it for a minute. Come on, Sho, let yourself enjoy it while it lasts. Aizawa scowls at his coffee like it holds the secrets for how and why his class is being so quiet. That's exactly the problem. The second I let my guard down, something insane is going to happen. Like the dorm blowing up. Why would the dorm blow up? Mike groans, throwing his hands up. Aizawa stares flatly at him until he thinks that one over. Oh wait, that might actually be a concern. No, really. Explosions. A legitimate risk in a class with a human bomb, a human lighter, someone who can generate whatever she wants, including incendiaries. And oh, that's right. Did you know some forms of acid are highly flammable? Just saying it out loud makes Aizawa want to go check that none of his students have managed to set themselves or anyone else on fire. Midnight leans back from her desk to chime in with a helpful, "Fun fact, flour can also explode." There's nothing fun about that, Aizawa hisses. Midnight snickers at him as Mike pats him reassuringly on the back. But you can't deny it is a fact, she says smugly, waving a chocolate-covered donut at him. Eyes narrowed, he snaps his hand forward and snatches it from her, stuffing it into his own mouth before she can do more than squawk. He doesn't even like the damn things, but sometimes sacrifices must be made to speak in a way that will be understood. It's thanks to Mike's ability to use his lanky limbs to keep the two of them from killing each other, while also dialing in an emergency donut delivery, that Aizawa makes it back to his class with both of his hands. But it was worth it. He returns to his suspiciously peaceful classroom and waits for a shoe to drop that just keeps refusing to drop. It's not until the students are filing in after lunch that he gets his first real hint of what's happening. Shinzo bumps into Hagakure. It's not too surprising. He's not as used to navigating around an invisible classmate as the others. It's just unfortunate he's also carrying a cup of very hot coffee that goes right down Hagakure's back. Oh, shit, you okay? Shinzo asks her, one hand clutching the mostly empty cup and the other hovering like he can't decide what to do with it. How burnt are you? Aizawa asks, already heading over. Aizawa braces for the dreaded word, but Hagakure pauses. I'm a bit scalded, I think, she admits in a small voice. Aizawa stares. Squints a bit. I swear that's all I think it is, Hagakure blurts out, sleeves waving frantically. Okay, Aizawa says slowly, unable to stop staring. I'll write you a hall pass to visit Recovery Girl. He turns to Shinzo. Eyes the hands now both clenching the mostly empty cup of coffee and the brown stains along his cuffs. Shinzo opens his mouth, stops, closes it again, purses his lips. I scalded my hands a bit, trying to catch it. He glances over at Hagakure, lips thinning further. Sorry, again, I should be more careful. It's okay, it was an accident. Still, I won't let it happen again. He sends both students off to Recovery Girl, keeping in mind a mental note to make sure Shinzo doesn't fall into a growth spiral over this. But from the way Shinzo's shoulders have eased by the time the pair return with freshly healed skin and new uniforms, he doesn't think he'll have to worry about that. It's a surreal feeling. So much so that he almost doesn't realize. He's almost certain that this is the first time since the implementation of the fine jar that someone has gotten significantly hurt and no one has had to pay the jar. And then, not long after that, Ayamo startles Kaminari so badly he accidentally shocks Kirishima, which causes Kirishima to bite his pencil in half with so much force, shards of it launch across the classroom. There's not a single person who doesn't have the instinctive reflex to dodge, but Shoji has the misfortune of having too much bulk and too little room to get properly clear. Everyone all right? Aizawa asks. And to his utter shock, Shoji raises his hand amidst the chorus of yeses and says, "Not quite." Aizawa's eyes fall to the lightly bleeding webbing stretching between Shoji's limbs and the spray of yellow pencil shards across it. It's not too bad. The worst is the rather large shard, the head of the pencil completely piercing through one of the webbings. It's the only one really bleeding. I can get most of these myself, but Recovery Girl will probably want to look at the big one. Go to Recovery Girl, he says slowly. Shoji nods and stands, accepting the pass when Aizawa hands it to him. The rest of the class manages to avoid mangling themselves and each other, another minor miracle he doesn't trust, until joint training with Class 1B at the end of the day. It's not a mandatory session, since the entire goal is to foster voluntary cooperation. But even so, not a single one of either class has opted out. He and Vlad stand back, watching their students intermingle, keeping a careful eye on the matchups and try to head off any issues. Neither one of them expect a problem from Ashido and Bando sparring, not until it's too late. An unexpected chemical reaction and Ashido using a lesser version of her Acid Man super move, one with just enough acid to coat her skin, ends in a burst of flash fire. He and Vlad are both moving the second they see the first spark, but it's Yayarozu and her nigh godlike knowledge of chemical compounds that saves the day. He's incredibly glad she's sparring with Kendo just a few feet away. It only takes her a second to process what's happening and react, throwing out her hands and spewing the correct solution to nullify the reaction. "Ashido, are you all right?" Yayarozu asks. "I'm fine," Ashido hisses through her teeth, and Aizawa barely has time to open his mouth before she follows it up with a, "Oh, dang it! No, I wrecked the streak!" The what? Ashido exchanges nervous glances with Yayarozu and blurts out, "I can't be the one to explain because I have to go to Recovery Girl and pay my fine." Aizawa raises an eyebrow at Yayarozu. "Are you explaining that, then?" Yayarozu actually raises her hand and says, "I have to take Ashido and Bando to the nurse." Aizawa stares at her long enough to let her sweat a bit before he nods slowly. Yayarozu hovers as the nurse bots load the injured two onto the stretchers and follows them out the door. The uninjured members of Class 1B eagerly follow Vlad in escaping to start cleanup, while the remaining members of Aizawa's class give each other nervous looks and hope someone else will step in and fill Aizawa in. So, who wants to explain what that was about? He asks the class. 18 pairs of eyes suddenly find the gym to be the most interesting building they've ever seen. So interesting, in fact, that they simply can't look at their teacher. Aizawa huffs and crosses his arms. He drags his eyes slowly across his students until they fall on the weakest link. "Class President, would you like to explain?" Ida jolts to attention, as expected. "Ah, well, Sensei, you see," Ida stops and forces himself board straight. "We realize that the purpose of the jar is to teach us to have better care for our own health and properly relaying the level of our injuries so that we can effectively treat it. And as such, we came up with a way to increase the efficiency of the jar." Aizawa's eyebrows raise higher and higher. What did you do, exactly?" "We started keeping track," Asui answers. "Of time between fines?" "Of how long it's been since we forgot we're important, too," she answers. "That we aren't just heroes, that we're people, too," Uraraka adds, "and we matter just as much as the people we save." "Ah," Aizawa thinks, "because that's it, isn't it?" He never stopped to put it into words when he was nearly ripping his hair out that first month. He was watching them bleed and break and brush it off in the same breath, ready to push forward until they dropped. It was agonizing to watch because he cares about these damn kids. Because they matter. More than just heroes. More than just for what they can give. They matter when they're not doing anything more than watching a stupid movie and inhaling junk food to be healthy. They matter when they're playing hide and seek in the pitch black of the early morning hours because no one could sleep. They just matter. Every second of every day, as constant and steady as breathing. But he didn't have the words to say that, even to himself. And so there was a jar. A cheap plastic thing with a slightly sloppily placed, handwritten label slammed on a table with a little too much force. A silent plea for them to understand something he couldn't articulate. So much he didn't even realize he was trying to. And they did. His stupid, brilliant students managed to figure it out. I am not going to cry in front of them, he thinks. And when that doesn't quite quell the urge, he thinks, I am not going to cry in front of Vlad. Which works better. Enough that he trusts himself to speak without sounding like he's going to cry. I see, he says, surprised he manages to make it come out so evenly. Hagakure slumps into Ojiro. Man, now we have to reset our count. We were so close to our first milestone. I really thought we could make it. Ojiro pats her back. We'll get there eventually, I'm sure. Yeah, if we work hard, maybe we'll manage to make it before graduation, Jiro says with a sarcastic drawl. The whole class groans and slumps. No, don't jinx us. I want to at least make it to the 1-month milestone. Milestones? He asks. Yeah, Kirishima says, eyes lighting up. It's like, the carrot and the stick. If we manage to go long enough without breaking the streak, we get a reward. Like an extra movie night or a special meal. I'm baking a cake when we hit 1 month, Sato says. Just 3 more days and we'd have hit a week. My extra movie night. It was so close. Sero slumped so low Aizawa worries he might just fall straight over. Tokoyami puts a hand on his shoulder and pulls him back upright with a solemn look. Hold steady. The hour of the horror movie extravaganza will come again. And the stick part, or is that just the fine itself? We decided that our system needed its own penalty, as it technically exists outside the fine jar system, says Ida. Everyone came up with their own punishment for themselves if they're the one to break the streak. Ashido will have extra dish duty for a month. Ashido hates doing the dishes. Hates it. She has to wear elbow-length rubber gloves to wash them to prevent the possibility of accidentally contaminating them with the residual chemicals from her acids. It just goes to show how seriously they're taking this. We also did research into training your mind to a healthier mindset, and we also have to write a reminder of why our injury mattered, and read it out to someone in class, Midoriya adds. I still don't get why we can't just double up our penalties instead, Kaminari groans. Ida whirls on him, his arm already pointing. The reminder is not meant to be a punishment. It is meant to help you internalize the thought through verbal reinforcement and validation from your peers. I know, but it feels so awkward. We're not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to challenge your current mindset or whatever, Shinzo says. Aizawa tucks his face into his scarf as he fights a smile. It sounds like a good system, even though I wish you'd told me before I spent half this week convinced this was the lull before we got hit with Hell Month 3. This gets him a bunch of ducked heads, Sheepa smiles in a wave of, Sorry, Sensei! He huffs, trying to hide the fondness in the sound, and waves them off. All right. Go help Class B clean up, and then you're dismissed for the day. The class scatters, joining the other class and tackling the various areas of disarray. They do their best to clean up what they can. Aizawa supervises, mulling over just how much he's underestimated his class this time. At least this time it's a positive, he thinks a little wryly. Vlad slides up next to him in a way that isn't subtle at all. He turns his head and raises an eyebrow at him. So, Vlad says slowly, completely ignoring the look, that jar of yours. He trails off there. Aizawa huffs in impatience. What about it? I don't suppose you'd be willing to, share the details. Aizawa crosses his arms, leveling an unimpressed look at Vlad. The students are about done cleaning up, and I know we both have better things to do than shoot the breeze. So if you wouldn't mind getting to the point. Gods, you're impatient, Vlad says, rolling his eyes. But yeah, sure. A lot of my kids overheard this stuff about that jar of yours, and they want to co-opt the idea for our class. Aizawa blinks, surprised. Sure, he says with a loose shrug, but you'll have to talk to my students to get all the details. Vlad shoots him a curious look, and Aizawa turns his face away before Vlad can catch the half-smile tugging at his lips. All I had them doing was paying a fine into a jar when they downplay their injuries. Then they went plus ultra when I wasn't looking and developed a whole system of punishments and rewards for how long they can go as a class without breaking their streak. He glances over at Vlad to find the man's eyebrows so high they're nearly to his hairline. Aizawa can't help but add on. They've even gone so far as to add a whole encouragement system, too. They did their own independent research into it and everything. Vlad whistles low and soft. Okay, well, I still think my class is clearly better, but I can admit you've got some impressive kids on your hands, Eraser. That's some serious dedication. He doesn't even try to stop himself from grinning into his scarf at that. I know. Once the students have cleaned up and cleared out, he goes back to his own dorm room to try and get as much paperwork done before his patrol as he can. It's an uneventful patrol, and an uneventful school day following it. But now that he knows it's not random chance causing it, but the effort and dedication of students, he's not worried. Luck is fickle. Hard work has substance, a foundation to build on, and Aizawa knows a thing or two about building on that foundation. There are normal bumps and bruises and little injuries to be expected when you're in regular fights, even if those fights are just friendly if competitive training. The kids do pretty good on their efforts to curb their bad habits and reach their first milestone. There are still slip-ups, still setbacks, but these are his kids, and now that Aizawa knows what they're doing, it's easy to encourage it. Waiting a moment before asking if they're okay so they can form an answer consciously instead of instinctively. And it's no time at all before the kids reach their first milestone. 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, chants the class. Aizawa tunes out the cheering and quells the swell of pride for urging him to smile. It still makes for a much more upbeat Monday than usual. Normally he takes a nap and does some paperwork before his patrol, but today he follows his students out the door, though at a much slower pace. Eri is just as excited as his students for the party, and the class is more than thrilled to include her in the planning process. He can give up a little bit of sleep if it means making her happy. Between Eri's arrival at the dorms and the high of the incoming party, the entire class is nearly vibrating with energy. He's torn between wanting to get the hell out of Dodge as fast as possible before the extrovert energy overwhelms him, and staying to make sure they don't blow anything up or set anything else on fire. It's a close internal battle, but in the end his sense of duty and belief that his students can refrain from dangerous activities for one night for Eri's sake wins out. All right, he says, and each of his students snap to attention. I'm heading out for patrol. You lot know the rules. Eri, make sure they don't blow themselves up. She nods like this is a deadly serious task she's been entrusted with, and not Aizawa joking. Well, half joking. He'd rather his students not blow themselves up if at all possible, but he isn't about to make that Eri's responsibility. He has a perfectly average patrol. He takes down petty criminals and discourages the rambunctious youths prowling the nights from causing too much trouble, and makes it home in time to pick Eri up and put her to bed at a decent hour. The rest of the week passes in a similarly mundane fashion. marked only by the slowly ramping up energy of the classroom as Friday edges closer, heralding in the Saturday of the party. The only other thing even close to noteworthy is Aizawa's own growing tiredness. With Eri visiting the dorms every night, Aizawa can't take as many naps as usual, and his post-patrol routine is just a little bit longer, stealing just a sliver more precious sleep from him. But it's worth it to see both his students and Eri light up. He doesn't mind being more tired than usual if it comes with listening to Eri excitedly chatter about helping Sato prep ingredients or helping Midoriya sketch out Barty decor placements. When the heavily anticipated Friday finally comes, he picks up Eri as per usual. Nezu now has her on creating branching backup plans. A very practical lesson, even if it's slightly terrifying to watch Nezu plan out a veritable chessboard of counterplans for an imagined governing body that worryingly resembles the Hero Commission. Best not to worry on that one. Either Nezu is just letting off steam, or, well, Aizawa has enough on his plate without making that his problem. Nezu will get him involved if he needs him. As he's dropping Eri off at the class, one last party prep session, Yayorozu stops him.
Oh, Sensei, before you go, Sarah was making cupcakes for the party, and we were wondering if you had a favorite flavor.
He blinks slowly. Shouldn't you be picking your own favorites?
Oh, we were going to make everyone's favorite. That's why we were wondering. Well, I mean, we know you're busy and you spend more than enough time on us as it is, but we wanted to thank you. And a few cupcakes aren't much, really.
It's not necessary. I'm your teacher. I have a duty to care for you all. Yayorozu fidgets.
Still, not every teacher does even half as much as you, and well, we'll all feel as you've gone well beyond anything that would be expected of you, and you're part of this class too. We'd like to share this with you, if you're willing.
Ah, well, you can't really say no to that, can he? I haven't really had cupcakes in a while. I'll have to give it some thought.
Yayorozu brightens and nods quickly. Of course, there's plenty of time still, and if there's anything else you'd like to add to the party, we'd welcome your input.
I'll think it over.
Thank you, Sensei. Have a good patrol.
He's not smiling as he leaves with a quiet nod. He's also not smiling when he finishes getting ready for his patrol and sets out. Not even a little bit. Nope. Patrol is, for the most part, fairly tame. A few would-be muggers, an attempted petty robbery, and one set of teenagers he catches in the middle of vandalizing something. He puts the fear of God in them and then hands them off to be lectured in assigned community service hours. The most exciting his night gets is when a couple of drunks get a little too rowdy and decide it's a good idea to bring their quirks into a bar fight. And even that is quickly broken up. Drunks don't make for a difficult fight. He worries about his student. He muses about the party. His mind even wanders to paperwork and grading. It's so boring a night. Stupid of him. It's exactly the kind of night and exactly the kind of mindset to set him up for a rookie mistake. He's so distracted, so bored, and so lost in his thoughts that he doesn't notice when muscle memory fails him and his movements drift off course. Just off course enough that when he casts out his scarf for the next swing, he's off enough to do something he hasn't done since he was a high schooler. He misses. There's no time for anything but shock and surprise as he's falling. A roof breaks his fall and several of his ribs at the very least. He rolls off it, bounces off a fabric awning, and hits the ground shoulder first. His arm shrieks in pain in time with his ribs. He's hurt himself enough times to know they're both broken. His hip and leg aren't much better, but the cacophony of pain isn't the right pitch for them to be broken. Badly bruised, but not broken. Fuck, he thinks. And then once more for good measure. Fuck. Okay, stay calm. You know what to do here. Hit your emergency signal and stay as still as possible. And of fucking course, he's laying on the emergency beacon. He tries to move as little as possible as he wriggles his good hand under himself until he can reach it. It gives a comforting little vibration when it's active. He sighs in relief. laying on the ground, waiting for backup to come. There's plenty of time to think. And the thought that stands out most isn't the fact that this is his third broken arm this year, or the pain he's in. It's, shit, the party. Recovery Girl is thoroughly unamused with him. She's even less amused when he asked if it was possible for her to completely heal him in one night. "You know perfectly well that I'm no miracle worker," she says, looking like she'd dearly love to be whacking him over the head. If he weren't already so injured, she probably would be. "You have 6 broken ribs. You've bruised the bone on your hip and your leg. Your entire side is one mass surface of level of bruises and scrapes. And you have multiple stress fractures along the impact points. What could possibly justify putting that level of strain on your body needed to heal it in such a period?" 1A just reached a milestone for the fine jar. The reward is a party, which is supposed to be tomorrow. They want me to be part of it. Recovery Girl sighs. "You're worried they'll cancel if you can't come." He nods. They worked hard for this. I don't want to ruin it for them. She stares at him for long enough a moment that he worries she's going to say no. Then she sighs and pinches her nose. "When exactly are they having the party tomorrow?" They were planning on leaving the morning for training and homework, setting up during the afternoon, and having the party in the evening. Recovery Girl mutters to herself, too softly for Aizawa to parse out what she's saying. Finally, she groans and rubs her hand over her face. "I think I can fix your arm and some of your ribs tonight, and maybe get you down to at least bruises, against my better judgment." "Thank you." "Don't! I'm only entertaining this because the last thing I want is to discourage those kids from learning good habits. If it weren't for that, I'd have you sedated until Monday, especially with that stunt you pulled after USJ. She gives him a dirty look, and he does his best to avoid as she leans in to press a kiss to his forehead. The exhaustion hits him hard as he hit the previous pavement tonight. He can probably hide whatever Recovery Girl can't fix before the party. At least until the end of the party. He can probably even duck out of it early if necessary. Hopefully not so early that the students think he doesn't want to be there. Tomorrow is going to be challenging. His students are clever. The slightest slip-up, and they're sure to latch on and start digging. He has to be sure they don't get that chance. Except, well, things don't work out that way. Aizawa wakes up to birdsong and sunlight clawing its way through a crack in the curtains and straight into his eyes. He grumbles and turns his head away into something warm at the side that tickles his nose. "Sorry, Sensei," Hagakure whispers. "Let me get that tea for you." The sunlight vanishes, and he relaxes with a soft huff, ready to let his exhausted body sink back into sleep. It takes Aizawa a good solid moment to realize what exactly is wrong here. He forces his eyes to open a crack. The first thing he sees is waves of white and a single stubby horn, Arius curled into the side of the cot, a vaguely familiar blanket tucked around her. Groggily, he leans back and looks around the room to find what looks like the majority of his class scattered about the room. It's clear they had to get creative to fit even this many of them into the room. As many chairs as can reasonably be expected to fit into the room while still leaving it possible to navigate are crammed in. Some are the type Recovery Girl keeps in her infirmary, though there is only supposed to be 2 in this room. The rest are a mishmash of ones he's pretty sure are borrowed from the dorms and ones he doesn't recognize at all. Yayoro's work, most likely. That or his students ransack the city for spare chairs. He's not sure which he prefers. Even with all the chairs, there's still students left without. Some have commandeered the other cots in the room, bundling as many of themselves as can be expected. The others... Hagakure reveals the location of the rest of the class as she finishes adjusting the curtains, turns around and reaches a hand up to the ceiling. A familiar pink-padded hand reaches down to high-five her. Aizawa follows the hand back to its owner and finds the remaining students hanging out on the ceiling. He stares. Uraraka blinks innocently at him and hands Hagakure a mullen bread. It looks homemade, marking it as most likely Sato's doing. "Good morning, Sensei," she says. "Good morning. What are you doing?" "On the ceiling? It's good practice." "Oh, is he awake? Good morning, Sensei," Hagakure says, turning to wave at him. Bits of crumb fall to the floor. Aizawa watches them fall and raises his eyebrow at her. "Recovery Girl says it's fine as long as we clean up after ourselves and don't break anything," Hagakure says, shyly reaching up to cover her mouth. Well, presumably. And she said, "All of you could be in here?" Kaminari beams from the blanket for built over a cot in the corner occupied by himself, Jiro, and Yayarozu. "She said it was fine as since us being here meant the likelihood of her needing all these beds went way down." Ida clears his throat. "I believe her exact words were that if we're quietly watching over our teacher, then she won't need to worry about us mangling ourselves while you're out of commission and have the entire class taking. At least I know I'm not going to have to face down Recovery Girl. Though that doesn't explain how you all knew to come here." 20 pairs of eyes find something to look at other than their teacher. "Sorry," Eri mumbles. Aizawa glances down to find her sheepishly worrying the hem of her dress. "Yamada-san came to get me, and I got worried because you weren't there, so he said you had to stay overnight with Recovery Girl, and I got scared." She stops her panicked ramble when Aizawa puts his hand on her head and gently ruffles her hair. "Sorry for scaring you. I'm fine." "Jar!" echoes from 21 voices. Aizawa freezes and stares at Eri and his students. For a moment, they are frozen in their nerves. Then they explode into movement. "You said it yourself! You agreed! Jar rules apply to you too! You told Eri-chan you do it! You must not break your oath to the Piranhas, Princess! Sensei, I apologize for the ruckus. However, we are correct that you did agree to the rules of the fine jar apply to you as well, as they clearly state that." Ida's arm chops vigorously as he lectures. Uraraka floats over his head, counting on her fingers. She reaches down and grabs Ida by the shoulders. "How much does he owe the jar? Help me do the math!" Ida pauses his lecture to confer with her, tallying just how much he owes the jar now. Aizawa opens his mouth to get them all under control. Before he can make an attempt, the door slams open. "I take it from the commotion you lot aren't supposed to be making that he's awake." Recovery Girl taps her syringe cane when the class comes to attention, silencing themselves and straightening. "Well, at least the noise let me know he was up. Run off now. I need to have a word with your idiot teacher while I patch him up some more." The kids are quick to evacuate, lest they insecure Recovery Girl's wrath. Eri says a quick goodbye as she's plucked up and tucked under Midoriya's arm. His other hand is busy acting as a tether for Uraraka, who reaches down and taps Eri so she can play human balloon too. "Don't forget, you owe the jar like 700 yen, Uraraka says as she's towed out the door, careful to make sure Eri doesn't bump into the frame. Silence falls as the last student vanishes behind the swinging door. Recovery Girl turns back to him, sighs, and then settles into one of the chairs by the bed. "So, first things first, give me a rundown on how you feel this morning, and don't say fine, because I'm not above snitching." Aizawa tries to tell himself he doesn't feel intimidated. He fails. After she finishes evaluating him, Recovery Girl settles back in her chair with a soft hug. "Well, that little plan fell apart completely." Aizawa can only nod as he mentally kicks himself for forgetting to account for Eri's reaction. "A good thing, I suppose. We both gave those kids far less credit than we should have." "Somehow, I always manage to. Did they say anything about their party?" "Well, it's nearly the afternoon now, but they did their homework while waiting for you to wake up. Then their plan is to train and do whatever prep work they can tonight, so they can have the party in the morning, which will give them plenty of time to wind down and clean up before Monday, and gives me plenty of time to get you in party condition." That is an extremely simple solution for something that didn't even once occur to him in his panic last night. Well, now I feel stupid for not thinking of that. Stupid and about 700 yen shorter. Although, to be perfectly honest, I feel like I should be paying something to that jar for going along with it. I think the students were more thinking of buying you something with the money rather than having you pay in. Recovery Girl snorts. The only reward I need is seeing those kids develop less destructive habits towards their health. He gives her a flat stare. Nezu bought me a very nice bottle of my favorite gin a while back. He coughs back a snort. Figures. Nezu is always on top of any given situation. Always. Speaking of favorites, your students wanted to remind you that they wanted to know what sort of cupcake flavor you wanted for the party. Aizawa pauses. Between his accident on patrol and the chaos of this morning, there wasn't time to give it too much thought. It's a bit of a silly thing to think too much on, all things considered, but it's also such a small thing for his students to ask of him. Too small to ignore. He racks his brain for the last time he bought himself anything cake-related. Other than the donut he stole from Midnight recently. He ate that out of spite more than genuine enjoyment. He doesn't think there are donut cupcakes. Or if there is, he really doesn't want to know. He's never been one for sweets, really, so it's no surprise he comes up empty. He thinks further back, trying to shake any idea loose, and was rewarded with an old, dusty, faded memory. It's a little painful in the way all old griefs are, but there's good things there, too. Things that he might be ready to have again. A rooftop, 2 old friends, and a misunderstanding. Aizawa's jelly packets aren't fruit-flavored, but Hizashi and Oboro didn't know that. And they'd wanted a cake they all could enjoy to celebrate their provisional licenses. I don't remember the name, but it was some kind of sponge cake with powdered sugar on top and strawberry jam and buttercream between the layers. Recovery Girl hums as she takes out her phone and taps a message out. After a moment, she shows him a picture of a cake that looks reasonably similar, if much less squashed and obviously homemade than the one presented to him by his friends. Yeah, that looks like it. Victorian sponge cake. Very classic, she tells him as she types on her phone again, presumably relaying this to one of his students. Tell them they don't need to go out of their way if they don't have what they need to make it. She raises an eyebrow at him. Ida is already at the store with a few other students, picking up last-minute supplies. Aizawa freezes, looking at her with trepidation. His class do not have a good track record with shopping trips. Midnight went along to prevent any incidents. He breathes a sigh of relief. Recovery Girl lets him leave with strict instructions to not overdo it. No training, no patrol, no physical hero work. He's on strict paperwork duty. Plenty of hours between now and the party to catch up on some paperwork. Horrifying. The first thing he does isn't paperwork. It's visit the dorms to pay his fine. He did give his word, after all. Aizawa opens the door to 1A's dorm and finds the party prep well underway. The whole class isn't there, but there's a good number of them dotted about helping Sato with his baking and getting underfoot of Bakugo's cooking, all while Yayarozu directs her classmates in decorating the common room for the party. What students aren't there, he assumes, are probably out training or with Ida at the last-minute party supply run. He spots Eri helping Sarah hang streamers, just as she spots him. She drops the roll she's helping hold and slams into his leg. He huffs, laying a hand on her back. At the dorms, he finds roughly half the class plus Eri setting up for the delayed party. The other half, he assumes, must be either with Ida or out training. They swarm him the second they notice him in the doorway, tasks abandoned and occasionally going flying. Eri slams into his leg. He settles a hand on her back with the smallest of smiles sneaking onto his face. Questions fill the air as his students crowd around. He can hardly tell who asked or what they even asked. By the time the crowd of worried students disperses, Aizawa is somehow on the couch with tea in one hand, a plate of food in the other, and 700 yen less than he came in with. He blinks, watching his own bewildered expression in the surface of his tea. He lets out a little huff of a laugh and settles back against the cushions. He drinks the tea and eats, watching the mild chaos of his students and Eri preparing for the party. Streamers are hung in wild twists and curls. Balloons are filled and dotted in colorful bunches. Brightly colored tablecloths are laid about. He catches sight of one particular pattern and nearly inhales his tea, trying to choke back laughter, as he recognizes Banana Mike in all his glory. A closer inspection reveals that all the tablecloths are various designs from that old Fruity UA Heroes set. He wants to go take a discreet picture of it to torment his Zashi with later, but the thought of getting up and walking over is exhausting. His eyes droop and he feels himself listing off to the side. He can't bring himself to care. He doesn't notice the student that slips over and slides the empty cup and plate out of his grasp, or Eri step up the stairs to the boys' side of the dorm. The patter of tiny feet barely reaches him, until he feels something soft fall over him. Aizawa blinks open one heavy eye. Eri determinedly arranges a familiar blanket over him. She catches sight of him, looking and squirms, looking strangely nervous. He hums softly at her, blinking slowly like she's one of the nervous street cats he needs to soothe from time to time. "This is my favorite blanket, so Deku said I could borrow it whenever I wanted," she says, pulling it up over him and tucking it in with tiny hands. She looks up at him, oddly nervous. "Is that good? You always make sure everyone is comfy. Deku says Recovery Girl's quirk makes you super tired. I don't want you to have to do stuff while you're really tired." "Yeah, it's good," he manages to mumble. Sleep takes him before he can stop to process exactly how embarrassed and touched he wants to be. He wakes up to soft voices and the sound of a shutter clicking. He grumbles and cracks open his eye. Most of his vision is full of white hair, but he can make out Namuri and Hizashi hovering over him, grins on their faces. "What?" he grumbles. "Shh! You'll wake her," Hizashi whispers. Aizawa glances down to find Eri curled in his arms, sound asleep. He sits up, smoothly and gently shifting her with him, and stands. A blanket pulls around his feet. He blinks down at it. "Ah," he thinks with all the airs of a man who knows it's too late and his doom is already here. "How many did you take?" he whispers, careful to keep his voice smooth lest he wake Eri. Namuri's lips twitch. "So many," Hizashi answers, smug. "Unless you want to wake Eri, there's nothing you can do about it," Namuri adds, waving her phone mockingly. He gives her a narrow-eyed glare, but she's right. They're both right. He won't risk waking her, and based how dark and quiet it is, the day is over. The students have finished their party prep, and everyone is asleep. He doesn't want to wake them up and cause a ruckus, especially not before the party they all work so hard for. "You two live. For now." Namuri sticks her tongue out. Hizashi snickers softly. Aizawa carries Eri home and puts her to bed before putting himself to bed as well. The next time he wakes, it's to Eri sitting at the end of the bed, staring at him as she silently and patiently waits for him to wake up in spite of how she's almost vibrating with excitement. He manages to contain her long enough to get her clean fed and dressed, but he isn't so cruel as to make her wait while he checks in with Recovery Girl. So he puts her in Mirio's capable hands to deliver her to the dorms, while he gets a clean bill of health from Recovery Girl. By some act of cosmic mercy, the party goes off without a hitch. He eats his cupcakes, ghosts of old friends and all. The kids do party games and somehow manage to convince him to join at least a round or two. The party winds down with a movie marathon. For once, Aizawa isn't the one tucking his class in and turning the TV off. He's too busy snoring away alongside them. "He fell asleep too, huh?" Mike says softly. Midnight hums as she snaps a few quick pictures of Aizawa, Eri, and the class lumbering away. Not for blackmail material. Well, not only for it, but for the memories. Later will bring tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. And every tomorrow will bring new problems, new struggles, new failures and triumphs that don't always feel like they outweigh them. New friends, new enemies, new people to grieve. But there will always be days like this one, too. Days where sweet cream and strawberries swallowed down beside an old grief that doesn't feel quite so hard to swallow around, that doesn't go down as bitter as it does yesterday. Today is a celebration, and if tomorrow is an ordeal, it will be one Aizawa goes into confident that his students will do all they can to meet it with every intention of coming out the other side as intact as possible. And if not intact, then at least prepared to repair and rebuild as best they can. And it does. And they do. And that concludes the third and final part of The Fine Jar by Bright Shadow. Thank you guys for coming with me on this journey, and I hope you enjoyed this fic as much as I did. This has been your fandom auntie, Buggy Cass, and I hope you loved it. Check out Eleanor Elizabeth's Discord. Check out Eleanor Elizabeth's page, because Goddess Nibbling deserves it. I have some amazing fan art for you to peruse while you listen to the bloopers from part 2 and part 3. And it's so gorgeous. Enjoy yourselves, and I love you all. Take care, my nibblings, and have a wonderful day or night. And please, get better sleep schedules than I have. Fare thee well.
I know you guys have been worried about my health, so it's time for the update. I had a slipped lead from an interstim implant that they put in for my bladder control issues. It gave me so much pain I couldn't walk for several months, much less finish my editing. And now that they finally surgically removed that thing, I am back up at my computer and have finished this fic for you guys. I am so glad to be back up. Now, sit back, relax, enjoy me messing up for your entertainment and the beautiful art by Darkness on Eleanor Elizabeth's Discord server. I have given links, hopefully, I am very bad at this YouTube thing, to the pictures of everyone on this beautiful picture of all the podfickers on the Discord server. Including myself. It's my first bit of fan art. I adore it. Have fun and enjoy watching me mess up. Bye!
Oh god, I'm gonna have to cut that laugh. Don't make faces. If it were one of your friends, you would want them to just sit there. Would you want them? With the excitement over he and Yagi, corral everyone back, and that pauses and that is so awkward. What? It's then that Ida decides that arm breaking is a Deku-Skad bonding activity. Deku-Skad? Deku-Skad? I can't speak today. If it doesn't work, Aizawa is fully prepared to blame Yagi and run while Recovery Girl hunts them for sport. I have to pause again. It might go a long way to helping them put the Coda situation behind them, he muses. Like a shark sensing blood in the water, Ashida zeroes in on his conflict and does a several... They've considered every single detail to make sure areas... How do I up that quick? Like it does during the third fire this week alone that Sato and Bakugo have set with their Okay, stop. I feel the need to point out the previous blooper was caused by my dad finding a bee in his bedroom. Chisaki. I cannot get that guy's name right. They move on to other classover. Classover? Yeah, no, that is not a word. Aizawa opens his mask. This is a tense moment. Why? I'm sure anything. I also don't feel I have all the facts yet, and I prefer to make important My gravelly Aizawa voice is hard on me, but you can't deny it is a fact. That was Midnight, not Mike. I'm gonna have to cut this laugh. When you laugh so hard, you cough. Okay. Moving that. And a forking. I just said of forking when I should have said of fucking.